All right, welcome back. This is going to be the third and final video for week two. We're going to go into a review of the literature, reviewing the literature, okay? Now, the literature review is going to set the foundation for what your dissertation is going to be, or your paper in this case is going to be. There's a lot of different sources that you can do for literature review. You can actually start with the textbook for this class, look through it and look at the back of it and look at the references that the book has. And sometimes it gives you an idea of what you want to use in your paper. So if you're doing a business textbook or an education textbook, get into the habit of looking at all the literature review that author went through and all the references that they have. You might want to look up one of the books they use so that you can use it in your literature review, and read it and look at it. Now, what I'm going to do with this PowerPoint, and I'll tell you now before we get into it, is when you do a literature review, especially when you do your dissertation, you're going to be going through, I'd say, literally at least a couple hundred publications. So you want to be able to quickly scan through it and get the relevant information for your topic. Again, to my example of an engine, get the relevant information. If you want to find a cure for colds, get the relevant information with sicknesses, pandemic, colds, symptoms, remedies. Get all those books. We used to have to haul them home. Now you can do it electronically. Thank God. And what I want you to do, what I want you to think about doing, is that you don't have to read the whole thing. Read the abstracts. Go through, dozens and dozens of research pieces, journals, articles. Look at the abstracts. The abstract should tell you if this is something that you're interested in. If it's not, discard it. You're going to be going through a lot of literature. So no, you're not going to cozy up to a book and read it all the way through. In a published book, you're going to be looking at the table of content. You're going to be scanning a couple of chapters. If it's no good, put it back on the shelf. And then have a good note-taking system, because you want to categorize it. Post-its is a lifesaver, because once you get the journal, once you get the book in your hand and you scan it, you can color code it. What pink means, air and fuel mixing, mechanisms, whether fuel injection or carburetor. So when I look at that pile of books that you have in your office and you see all these little pink post-its, you know that pink means either a carburetor or fuel injection. Okay, or all the yellow post-its have to do with cold remedies. And so you organize it that way. Required elements of several doctoral classes, absolutely. Significant components of your dissertation, absolutely. Necessary to include in any publication, absolutely. If you're going to publish anything, you need to have a good, extensive literature review. It requires a significant commitment of time and energy. I would say that's probably the most time-consuming element of any dissertation. But once you get into it, believe it or not, it gets kind of fun. It's lonely, because your wife and your children and your colleagues, they can't help you. You pretty much have to do it on your own. Whatever works for you. Again, have a notebook, sketch it out. Be ready to erase a lot. Do it by categories. Okay. Let's see. So identify theories and constructs through it. Locating relevant literature. Look at some of these. Do it through Alliant, through the university. Do it. An electronic source is a godsend. You don't have to lug it home in a big wagon anymore. All right. And then stay as current as possible. This is something that I really emphasize, because you don't want to be spending a lot of time, and I'm talking like a year or more, in collecting references for your dissertation, and then have your committee say, these 50 are too old. Update them or delete them. you're going to pull your hair out. You're going to cry. You're going to want to go home and forget about it. So do yourself a favor when you start, get into the habit of making them very, very recent. Now, this suggestion here says year 2000 or later is a good rule of thumb. I would even say 5 years, no older than 5 years. And if you're just starting your dissertation, do yourself a huge favor and try to make it no older than 3 years, because it's going to take time for you to do your dissertation, and you don't want at the end of it for them to say, "Gee, this is really old." Now, the question always comes up, but what if it's a really old, book and it's still relevant? Well, find a newer reference to that book that updates it. Okay, so if you're a math major and you want to write something about Newton, and so you want to cite Newton. Not obviously Newton hasn't published in the last 5 years or in the last 20 years, but find some reference to Newton's work that's more relevant, and then you can get away with using Newton's really ancient book, but that's in your literature review, but you have all these other guys who wrote about that concept recently, so that you make it relevant, you make it more current. You don't want a body of your research in your dissertation to be torn out before it's too old, because it's too old, because I guarantee you by that time you will have spent hundreds of hours. I don't think I'm exaggerating. Hundreds of hours looking through literature, and now that I've scared you away, it's fun. It's fun. So keep your nose to the grindstone, and you'll do it. Okay, types of literature you will find: research theoretical and literature reviews, published, and you can read those. Where you'll find scholarly journals, textbook, newsletters, not Wikipedia. Look at the electronic media in the university libraries, and you'll be safe. You want the journals to be peer reviewed. And again, if you look through the university sources, they're pretty safe. They won't be kicked back. Read the material, take notes. Don't read the entire thing. Scan it. Take notes that make sense. So when you pick up a book, you know why you have that book. That book touched upon this, and this. You have it, all with your post-its, and then in your notebook, you have it all sketched out in outline form. You have a little code where you want to talk about codes, and a subset of that is all your yellow tags that are symptoms, and all the little blue tags that are doctors that talk about the importance of colds and treating their symptoms. So you have to have it very organized. Build tables to summarize literature, definition, methodology, and findings. Have all this, again, organized. Writing the literature review. What I want you to do for this assignment in literature review in our course is to write an abstract for each one. So get into the habit of doing that, because when the ones that come to the surface that are relevant to your study, you want to write a little blurb. Even in your own language, remind yourself what that book or that article was about, and what it did, and how many people got into it, and the results of it, and the importance of it, and so that when you incorporate that literature review into your dissertation, you have little notes that you can now reword in a more scholarly way. Okay, so for the assignment for this course, for the 5 that I'm requirement, I want you to have a little abstract, a little summation of each one of those references. Okay, and I think the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. Don't overwhelm yourself. That's why I say 5 for the purpose of your study. It might be more. Let's do it 5. Let's do that well. Okay, and I just want to make sure that everything that you have in your literature review is relevant. If you have 5 references in your reference list, and one of them isn't even mentioned in your paper, I'll ask you, why is this 5th one even in your reference list if you didn't mention it? And vice versa. If in the body, if you ramble on a certain topic, I'm going to ask you, who said this? Everything that you write in scholarly writing has to have a reference. You can no longer say, look outside, the sun is pretty, is nice and warm, and it brings out the flowers. If you say that, I'm going to say, according to who? Where did you read it? What's the most recent article that you read that stated that? Your opinion is not welcome. It's no longer welcome in writing. Certainly not in academic writing. You can save that for writing letters, but not in academic writing. Everything you put into a paper has to be cited. Okay. So good luck with all that. Try not to stress. Email me if you have any questions. In the purpose of this course, less is more. Okay. So realize what each section of this paper is, what the purpose of it is, and then address that purpose. Okay? Try not to stress out. It should be fun. Okay, bye-bye.